The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the Dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like expecting the leadership of a team captain on the football field, but getting a sea captain. You wouldn't settle for just anything for your team. Shouldn't it be the same for your insurance? So don't settle for just any insurance when you can go with a leader. State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn and welcome to How We're the Podcast as we quickly move from reflecting on our midweek 4 draw at Norwich City to start talking about the visit of Swansea City at the weekend. And to talk about all things Swansea City, we are very pleased to have the help of Luke Davies from the Swans Cast Podcast. Welcome, Luke.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Excited to talk about it all.
Yeah, good stuff. How's it going?
Yeah, it's all right. I think it's a little bit better for us after recent weeks. It did look a little bit dodgy going back a few weeks ago, but we've seemed to have come around a little bit with our form. So we're not quite out of the woods yet, I think, but we are in a lot better position than we were in some of the other teams that are below us. Yeah,
well, I mean, we'll get into it, but I had seen that you'd had an uptick in form, but I just hope the game's better than our midweek game against Norwich, but let's I said about that, the better. As I said, you're from the Swans Cast Podcast. Do you want to tell us a bit about kind of your podcast, how long you've been up and running?
Yeah, we started in the COVID era, as a lot of others, I think, popped up during that time. So 2021, going a couple of years now. So we just generally chat about, the Swans. I try to do match previews where I can. Otherwise, we've just got a podcast you can catch on YouTube or any of the normal podcasting platforms. And yeah, it's just a bit of a chat, really. A couple of lads who like football having a chat, and I think that's the approach we like to try and go for, to try and get a bit of a discussion going.
That's it. That's the way we look at it. Almost like you're just standing at the bar in the pub with a pint, and you're just cracking on. So how far does your love of Swansea City go back then?
My personal start of watching them is probably a little bit younger than other Swansea fans, but I came up. My immediate family didn't like football. So when I started delivering the local newspaper around, I think it was 13, and obviously we plastered all over the back pages then. At the time, we were rising up through the league, so it was League One under Roberto Martinez, and it was always on the back pages with like Chasing Scotland and, Leon Britton and all of those sort of legend players, if you like, from that era. And I kind of got into it from delivering the papers and looking at the results and what was going on the back pages, and then managed to get to some games with my granddad, who always had a season ticket, and it went from there, really. And I guess it was good because I got near the beginning of the journey upwards is when I kind of got into it, if you like. So never didn't like football, but I guess as a younger kid, you kind of, if you're not getting taken, you're not going to you. So I kind of got into it myself through that way. But yeah, that's where it started.
Well, I mean, obviously looking back at the history of Swansea, I mean, I know there was that rise under John Toshak in the late 70s and early 80s when you look back at the history, but the rise you've just described, and then those 7 years in the Premier League, and you obviously had the League Cup win, which meant a season in the Europa League. I mean, that must be considered kind of almost the glory years of Swansea City.
Yeah, I think I actually spoke about this on our last podcast, and I said, the reality is, we've probably seen the peak of what we're going to see in our lifetime. Yeah. And people probably don't like hearing that if I said that. So certain people hearing it probably like, what are you on about? There's no reason we can't get there again. And it's like, if you look at the landscape of football now, it must be it's so much harder to get there, to stay there and kind of stabilise. We were there for 7 years, at least for half of that, or more than half of it. We look quite comfortable in the league. To get back to that position, I don't know if we're ever going to see that sort of high again, or not for... I can't predict it at the moment in the immediate future anyway. You never know what can happen in football. But I wouldn't be surprised if we've already seen, like, you know, the peak of what we're going to perhaps see for a long time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I personally think your biggest achievement during that time was getting 5 million for Danny Graham, but I think that's a completely different conversation. It's funny actually because you said that, and I say the same to people with in terms of Sunderland finished 7th under Peter Reid, but during that stint, I mean, at least you won something. Obviously, the League Cup 2013 against Bradford at Wembley, probably the easiest League Cup final
we couldn't take it for granted. Like, they beat a couple of good teams on the way to get there, and as much as you kind of see on paper and you think in your head, like, got to win this game, you're never going to have a better chance. Like, you know, we have to still do the job, I guess. Take nothing away from Bradford's journey, but yeah, that was a great time, and obviously going to the Europa League as well. Like, wonder if I'll ever see that again, but at least we got to see it.
Yeah, well, I've seen Phil Parkinson work fairly close quarters, so I'm thinking it was more luck than judgment that they got there, to be honest. But I mean, again, looking at Swansea, it's the 6th season in the Championship since relegation from the Premier League in 2018-19. Those first 2 seasons finished 6th and 4th under Steve Cooper, so they obviously ended in defeat in the playoffs. But then he left the club, and he'd eventually go on to do what he did at Forest. But I mean, that kind of, you know, when Cooper left, did that go down well with the fans at the time?
Yeah, it did actually, because they didn't enjoy the way that he was playing football. I don't necessarily agree, personally. I think you said it there. It was Graham Potter had the season before him. He didn't get in the playoffs. So Cooper had 2 seasons, got in the playoffs both times, got to the final on one of them. And there was a lot of discontent after we lost 3-0 in the final. But, like, I think if anyone's honest, Brentford were the team that season that should have gone up anyway. Like, it's frustrating when you get to that stage and don't do it. Probably wasn't the incorrect result, really. We had a chance again, automatics that season, where we didn't recruit well enough in January. I think that was part of the problem. And then our second half of the season fizzled out. We didn't quite finish as high in the playoffs then as we probably should have. And as a result of that form, there was a lot of maybe 1-0 wins or draws or not much goals, not much goal action. And the fans, for whatever reason, just didn't like that. They weren't happy. They like to see a passing brand of football here. And yeah, so when Cooper went, it was weird because people weren't that bothered, even though there was a bit of a successful period. And then Russell Martin came in, brought all of that passing football and stuff, but not the success. So that's the conversation, you know, and that's where it's like, what do you actually want? But, you know, that's another podcast altogether.
Well, you know, I remember watching Swansea under Russell Martin, and you finished 15th and then 10th. And I remember watching them, and I could never understand why he insisted on playing the way he did with the players that he had. I mean, when you look back at Russell Martin, because, you know, he was there for 2 years, I mean, do you kind of rate the job he did, or was it just almost like a vanity exercise in playing the football he did?
I think he did a good job with the players that he had, but you also, I think it's fair to say that he should have, perhaps the second season especially, it should have been better. He obviously came in with that way of playing, which was what we wanted, which is why we got him. That was the task he got set. But maybe it was a more extreme version than we've ever seen, in terms of like 80% passing possession and stuff like that, which, whatever, that's fine if it works. And I just think ultimately there was a period in our second season that we threw away our chances of any success because of some background stuff that was going on. So we didn't have the best January again, bit of a theme. And he threw his toys out of the pram about it a little bit. And I think the result of all of that meant we went on a really bad run of form through January up to about March, end of March, beginning of April, something like that. Where I think it was 3 wins in 24 games. And then you say we finished 10th. I think we were 4 points off the playoffs in 10. And you're just like, well, if you didn't have a bit of a paddy and kick off about the fact the board didn't give a striker, and now you're saying that you're limited and all this, that, the other. It's like, 4 points in a 24-game period where you only got 3 wins, and all 3 of those wins were against teams that had a red card. I just think you could have done a little bit more in that time and got over the line. I think it was in our hands a little bit. We should have done a bit better. And there was a lot of games that season where there's one we had a 2-0 lead in like the 90th minute and drew. There was one where we had a 2-1 lead in like the 90th minute and lost 3-2. Little things like that maybe don't go your way through the season. So I'm not saying he did a bad job. I just think he's very clever in the media, and he really got the fans on board with what he was doing. So they built a good relationship with him, and maybe that give him a bit of good stand-in no matter what happened, because I think any other manager would have got sacked in that run of 24 games, to be honest. But then he ended the season. He did kind of come out and admit that he kind of lost his way a bit after the negativity of not having the players he thought he was going to get in January. He kind of got a bit switched off, I think, and he came out at the end of this period when we got our first win. After that, we went on a run of 7 wins in 9 to end the season, drawing the other 2. Just wasn't quite enough to get us to the playoffs. And he kind of said in that period, I had to sit down, take a step back and think, how do I stop this? Have I been applying myself properly in this period, or the sort of negativity and the I can't think of the word I want to use, but when something doesn't go your way, and you're kind of taken aback, how do you deal with that adversity? That's it. So he didn't deal with that very well, I think, at the time. And yeah, I think he realised at some point that actually maybe I should just continue to try, because I think it was feeding into the players, feeding onto the pitch, onto the team. And that spell was quite difficult to watch. And don't get me wrong, when it went well, like that last 9 games, really good football. I think we could have beaten anyone in the league during that period on our day. And that's the best of what he can give you. It's just, I think a lot of people forget what came before that and what probably cost us a chance of a promotion or a chance at the playoffs. Like 4 points, honestly, we 100% dropped more than 4 points when we shouldn't have that season. And he'll be remembered for the way that he played. He'll be remembered for beating Cardiff 4 times out of 4, getting the double against them twice in a row, considering no team had ever done that before in the history of the fixture. But I do think he could have done more, and he probably knows that himself, to be honest. But he's a young man who's developing, so you can't knock him for trying, I guess.
Yeah. I always find Russell Martin a bit of a strange one, and people talked about how he was at Southampton, it wouldn't change, but yeah, I mean, looking back last season, Michael Duff started the season in charge, but then he was replaced with Luke Williams, who had done so well at Notts County. So he had a change of manager, ended up finishing 14th last season. So if we go back to the summer, obviously beginning of Williams' first full season in charge. So where were the Swansea fans' expectation this season, especially based on the transfer business that happened in the summer?
I think we just wanted a season of stability and perhaps to be somewhere. I thought we'd be in the middle of the table somewhere. I think most fans were fine with that. They just wanted to see a bit of progress on the pitch, something that was being built, a bit of an identity coming back. Because again, we went from Russell Martin to Duff, as you mentioned, and it was not polar opposite, but it wasn't Russell Martin, and I think that was a problem for a lot of people. I'm not sure. Duff didn't help himself in a lot of ways, right? But I think any manager that came in then was going to have a tough job, and obviously that didn't last very long. So there's a bit of a reset needed after that, because they signed a lot of players to play this new way that Duff was going to bring, and it didn't pay off. And a lot of the players that got brought in then, they weren't really suited to what we were trying to do after that, which was Luke Williams going a little bit more aligned with what we had before with Russell Martin. Not quite there, but very similar. So if you didn't realise, Luke Williams was actually assistant manager at Swansea while Russell Martin was here for a period of time. So a lot of similarities there. There's obviously differences as well, but in terms of the players that Duff brought in, didn't quite suit what we wanted to go back to again. So we go in, full 360, but halfway through you've invested in 13 players we brought in that summer for maybe a style of play that we were going to change before we'd gone back to it. And I was like, all right, okay, so we've got all these players that maybe Luke Williams isn't going to be using, spent all this money and all of the rest of it. So all of that came into the expectations of the season. I think there was a bit of reality around the recruitment last summer. And to be fair, they went out and less players came in, but it looked like they were more selected for first team and would have a bit of an impact. And more of them have than haven't. I think 1 or 2 that haven't had the biggest impact, probably say, is Ji Sung. But not to say he's been awful, he's just a bit of a raw talent that hasn't been tapped into yet. Maybe still a bit nervous, bit lightweight, and bit of a work in progress. But the others are overly quite solid, really, especially the goalkeeper and Franco in midfield. So at least we've added solid quality, even if it was less of it. And that was fine as a building block then to go into a project for the future. The way we were playing did start improving. The first part of the season was a bit slower, but he did tweak things and he did adjust, which was one of the criticisms I had of him, because I thought there was a lot of themes we were seeing at the end of last season from Luke Williams, which you kind of wrote off because he came in January, so it's fine, you haven't had the time to work with him. Mm-hmm. But then they carried on to this season. I was like, okay, what's he done in the summer? But he did tweak them and got rid of them, and we looked like we were in a good place going into Christmas, where got a few wins under our belt, looked like momentum was building. We'd just been taken over. The chairman bought out the owners. There was a bit of a takeover going on. Looked a bit more positive, and then all of a sudden he got linked to move to West Brom, and it fell apart again. And I say fell apart, like, to put into perspective, we play halfway through the season, yes, we played everyone once. I think we were sitting 4 points behind the playoffs or 3 points behind the playoffs in like 9th, somewhere around there. And just beating QPR and Luton at home over Christmas. We hadn't lost a game all season by more than one goal. So we'd been, as much as I said, there was ups and downs, and there were some issues from last season carrying over that we were still fixing. We're competitive in every single game. You know, if you're only losing by one or you draw in every game, you've got a chance of either a point or a win, you know, up until the final whistle, because anything can happen. So that's a good foundation to build on then when you do perhaps start clicking. And we were getting there. He got linked to West Brom, and yeah, he didn't basically shut it down. It looked like he wanted to go. He really didn't do a good job in the media. And then the next game after that, we go away to Portsmouth and lose 4-0. And January was just horrendous. I think it was one win in like a 9-game period, one draw as well. But the losses weren't, one goal. They were just awful. A couple of 3-0s, just not in games. I think there was one at Norwich where we were 1-1 at 60 minutes and lost 5-1. Like, how does that happen? Something was clearly wrong and not in line with what had happened for the first half of the season. So whether it was a case of, he didn't end up going to West Brom, obviously, for whatever reasons. And he came out and apologised and said, like, my comments were meant to be a joke. I didn't think the speculation was real. I thought it was all everyone winding me up. And it's like, come on, mate. We lost to Cardiff in that period as well, in a bit of a really dull performance and dull game. And that's not what we want to see against your big rivals. Yeah. If you go up to Newcastle and don't lay a finger,
no, it's
not going to go down well. It's not going to go down well, is it? So, like, it's hard to recover from that, especially when you've just been linked, not played it down, to leaving somewhere else. And then in the next 2 games after that, you play Cardiff and get drubbed. I said at the time, if we have a drubbing year, I don't think there's any coming back. They waited a bit longer than I personally wanted, but obviously you had to go in the end. And hindsight's easy for me to say that, isn't it? I understand why they waited, but looking back, we probably derailed our season a little bit, and we're going to end, by the look of it, in a bit of no man's land. Yeah. Sheehan's come in and done a good job. He instantly got a reaction, beating Blackburn 3-0, and the form since Luke Williams has gone has kind of been in line with before January for the whole season, which I would say, if you take that month and a half out of when Luke Williams threw away the season, probably be sitting in a position at the moment where we're just outside the playoffs, potentially able to have a crack. I wouldn't put money on us being the team that would have got in at this stage, because I think our January was quite poor again. But that's where we were, and I think that's where the expectations of the season were. We've probably fallen below them because of the discontent and sort of, the things that happened in the middle of the season. That we wanted stability. That stability went, and it fell apart for a period of time. We're just glad that is kind of, we haven't obviously got a manager long-term yet. Sheehan's here to the end of the season, but at least it's looking in a better place. We're a bit more stable and comfortable now, a bit less pressure going into the end of the season, I think, where we are at the moment than where we were a month ago.
Yeah. Well, you just mentioned something in there in terms of that, like that takeover back in November, I think it was. And it was, from what I read, a group led by Brett Kravitz and Jason Cohen. And when I read, they reached a magic number of shares to have a majority stake. Again, that was back in November. How significant was that?
It's hard to say at the moment, to be honest. It doesn't feel like anything's really changed. Now, Andy Coleman was chairman at the time, and he was part of this takeover group as well. So he was chairman. He got with these investors, and they all got together to buy out the owners that left. and Andy Coleman then would stay on as chairman, but he's since announced his departure, so he's going to be leaving in the summer. So I think there's a lot of transitions still ongoing. It's hard for me to answer that question yet because I haven't seen how the impact of these new guys is going to affect the club. We haven't really heard much of him. Like, Andy Coleman was the spokesperson, but now he's left. We were all kind of baffled in the last couple of weeks, like, who's actually making the decisions now? Because we just feel a bit lost with kind of who is who in the club, really. And there's so many named roles of like CEO and COO and all these different roles now with these business people and stuff. And I don't know, it just feels a little bit less. We went through our success with Hugh Jenkins being the chairman. He knew exactly who was in charge. He knew exactly who the board was, who was making decisions, where the decisions were coming from, why they were being made, all of this. And we don't really feel like we got any of that at the moment. Now, we wanted, hopefully, with the takeover for that to improve. Got to give it a bit of time. I think partly why Andy Coleman's gone is because of how poor January was and because of the form around Luke Williams' last month and a half in charge, because he was undoubtedly his man. So I'm not sure the ins and outs of the conversations that might have led to his departure. They've made it sound like it was his decision. Whether it was or not, I'm not sure, because I think there was a lot of bad press after January, a lot of bad opinion from the fans, because obviously they'd done this takeover and everything that happened in January was like, well, that's the same as what's happened for the last however many years. Like, has anything actually got better now? Or was it just more of the same, a lot of lies and like, just going to say what we want to hear, but actually no action? And it feels like the new, owners that bought the shares and stuff, perhaps were like, well, hang on, that's not a good look for us, not having this. And then soon after, he's announced his departure, which we weren't really expecting, to be honest. But yeah.
Well, it's funny because I was reading a statement on the club website that they put out. I think it was only in the last week they've put it out.
Yeah.
And there was like one little sentence about Williams leaving, and it said, despite heading into Christmas in a strong position in the league, the results, performances and communication during January and February fell short of our expectations, and it became clear this was the right decision for the football club. I mean, from the hint in there, it sounded almost like there was some sort of clash and they just didn't get on.
Yeah, I don't know what happened behind closed doors. I think the communication thing might be regarding the media that was on about with the leaving for West Brom potentially. Maybe not, but obviously in regards, if you're talking about Luke Williams in a statement, then him and the way he communicated in the press is what caused all of the discontent. And I don't know how much of that could have had an effect on players bringing in. Like if they think, well, the manager doesn't want to be there, why am I going to go sign for Swansea? No one knows that. It might have shelved all of their plans in terms of what they were going to do in January. And then I know it had an effect on, for example, Harry Darlin signing a new contract, which he has now not done, which by all account he was just about to put pen to paper before that all happened. So I think there was a lot of frustrations caused from what in his head was a simple joke in the press. I think clearly it wasn't, but it's done more damage than I think meets the eye if you look at it at face value. And then I don't know in terms of board level what the discussions were around him. Maybe they wanted to get rid of him sooner than later, and Coleman stopped them, and the results just kept going bad. I really don't know. No one really knows the ins and outs of what's happened there. But ultimately, the signings were not there either in January. We brought in Lewis O'Brien on a loan, which would be good, but we lost Matt Grimes. So I'm glad Lewis O'Brien's come in, don't get me wrong, because he has done a good job of filling that void. As much as he's not the same player, we've got someone else in the midfield that can run the midfield in a different way, which if we didn't have him, I don't know what we'd be doing right now. So massive signing that we know of now, but still he was the only one. And we didn't really strengthen really because Matt Grimes went. And I think, it was disappointing.
So from what you've just said there, it sounds like the January window was just completely wasted based on what was going on.
Yeah, it was. And we did sign a player, but he won't be coming to the summer because he got immediately loaned back to his club, which I think the timing of that announcement, and he looks like an exciting player, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not going to say his name because I'll probably butcher it without it being on paper in front of me. If I hang on. Melker Widell it is. So he plays somewhere on a continent, but he's basically just got capped for Sweden. So he's an upcoming youngster who is highly sought after by a lot of clubs by all accounts. And the reason we got him now, we were led to believe, was because we allowed him to be loaned back, which is fine, but not when you don't sign anyone else for now, when before January started, we were perhaps looking at signing players to make a playoff push. By the end of January, we were signing players to perhaps not fall into a relegation battle, and we did neither. And I think the timing of that, it was announced, I think, pretty much the week of confirmation that Matt Grimes was leaving. So all of that came out that he was going. Then we announced that signing. Then Matt Grimes left properly 2 days later, and it was like, okay, so what's the succession plan for our captain leaving? Because we're kind of looking into the future year, which makes you think they were caught quite off guard with Grimes' departure. But I think that's part of the problem, isn't it? The plan was not correct, maybe, and the implementation of that plan. And it sounds like deadline day was a bit of a mess as well, to be honest, where Andy Coleman, it does seem, tried his best, but unfortunately he's not a football person. And the reason he had to try his best was because all of the people doing the jobs below him hadn't done their jobs, to the point where he's had to go in on deadline day and run around like a headless chicken to try and get something over the line, which ultimately didn't happen. Which, if you leave it last minute and late like that, you kind of get yourself caught out, really.
Yeah, well, you just need to go on Netflix to have a look at Sunderland messing up January transfer deadline days. Well, as you said, Alan Sheehan stepped in at the time, and it seemed to kind of buy the owners some time to find a new manager, and he's still there. And I didn't look, you were talking about the form, and I didn't look at the kind of the games played and won, lost and things, but I saw that the day that Williams was sacked, and I looked at the gap between the bottom three and the playoffs, and it's pretty much point for point exactly the same as it is now. So how much has changed into on the pitch since Williams left and Sheehan took over?
Yeah, we haven't necessarily built a huge gap. I think what's happened is there's a bit of a cushion with us in the bottom three with teams in the way. A lot of these teams have all been having good form at different times that have meant whoever's in the bottom three, like that distance isn't hugely different. However, we had 1 win in 9, the last 9 games of Luke Williams' spell, and I think Alan Sheehan's had 7 games now, and he's had 3 wins and 2 draws in that 7 games. So if we continued the form we were showing before he came in, probably be in that battle right now, if not even in the relegation zone. So the fact that he's managed to pick those results up is hugely important. That's 11 points in that 7-game spell, which is massive, really, for if you take those away. What's changed on the pitch? It's not as heavily focused on possession. We do still want to play nice and keep the ball, but he has been a bit more direct a little bit with Lewis O'Brien and then not Matt Grimes. It makes sense to do that. And he did recently change when we went away to Leeds, the formation, which he originally started with a 4 at the back when he first took over, which was a change from the last few under Luke Williams, which were a 5. But the last 2 games, he's used a 5 as well. So he's obviously been a bit flexible in the formation, I think he's trying to use the best players that he's got, get them on the pitch, So it's probably fair to say our forwards, so our wingers and just those players in general this season haven't had the biggest impact. So having more of the defence with the wing-back system, which our wing-backs are probably quite strong in our team, with Josh Key and Josh Tyman, and more in midfield, I think they're getting more out of the team that way rather than relying on wingers to try and do a bit more damage up front, because they haven't been doing enough probably all season, really. And it worked, to be fair. So we got a point away at Leeds and we won against Derby. As much as it was a bit of a dull game, it was an important win because we're just trying to keep our distance, and Derby were on a 4-match winning run before that. So as much as we ground out a 1-0 win at home, I don't really care right now. We can look at the performances and the style of play and the identity again in the summer when we address who the permanent manager is going to be, whether it's him or someone else. But he's doing what he needs to do at the moment, which is to get us over the line, make it so we've got a comfortable end of the season, so we're not looking over our shoulder, so we can perhaps start to focus on next season then properly.
Yeah. Well, how happy are the fans to wait until the summer? I mean, is there a bit of unrest while kind of it's up in the air who's going to be the manager next season?
No, I think they're fine to wait. He's been confirmed until the summer now, so he's been confirmed that he's staying until then, and then they'll review it. I think it's a fair decision because when you're sacking a manager mid-February or whatever it was, it's difficult to go and get someone. You're either getting, like, if we were in a position a bit lower down the league than we were, maybe you go and get someone that's going to make sure you stay in the league, and that would be fair until the summer. Sheehan came in and started doing a solid job, so there's no point changing him unless you had the person that you knew you wanted for the next project. It's quite difficult, I think, to get a person like that in mid-February. You're either going to pay a big fee to get him from somewhere, and the ones that might be available on a free, like, you're not going to have the best selection. They've probably they could be more picky, I would imagine, because, or at least with wages, they could probably ask for a bit more because they know the situation you're in. So I just think it gives a bit more time to see where we are, to kind of make the right decision and not rush the decision, because I think it's important that we don't rush the decision, to make sure we get it right. And as long as Sheehan keeps us in the league, and to be fair, he's continued doing a solid job. Like, I don't really see someone else coming in and necessarily doing a better job in terms of the amount of points he's got from that selection of games. No, some of them have been tough. We played Burnley and Leeds in that run. Got a point to Leeds that no one was expecting. So I do think it's a good decision to wait till the summer and kind of readdress everything and start again from then.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned that statement from the owners on the website, and when I was reading through it had a lot of info about trying to keep up with clubs with parachute payments, which we've been trying to do this season. And it talked about appointments that they've made on kind of player recruitment. So like Richard Montague from Notts County, James Morgan-Snowley from Rangers. I mean, with those sort of appointments, does it feel like they're taking a slightly different approach? And does that maybe change the type of name that might be in the running for the manager's job in the summer?
Potentially. It's hard to say, because you've told all this before with other names in the past, and it's one of those where you can only judge it based on what you see. And it's a new ownership team anyway, making the decision of the new manager for the first time. They did mention in the statement, they put out a survey for the fans, which they mentioned maybe in one of the recent statements, might not be the one you saw, but one of the ones before, where they've said, like, we're going to put the survey out, we want to know what you think, what stuff means to you and stuff. And one of the questions in there was, what does the Swansea way mean to you? Which we refer to the way we play in our identity as the Swansea way down here. And a lot of people kind of consider the Swansea way in line with a possession-based, exciting, nice football to watch. But they've actually directly asked that question in a survey that they recently put out. So it'd be interesting to see how much value they're going to give that, because it was made a big deal when they signed Michael Duff and then sacked him. Coleman, who was chairman at the time, made a big deal of saying, we got it wrong, in line with what you expect from the Swansea way, and we're going to make sure the next person fits that narrative. Coleman's obviously not here anymore, but he's the guy that brought in the new investors. So I'm not sure. We'll see. Because they would have seen what happened when they brought in a completely different approach. In terms of, I think it's one of those, we've got to get instant results, so you're already up against it. And I think at least if they do it, there's got to be good communication around the reasoning and what they're trying to go for and the thinking behind it. So it will be interesting. But I wouldn't have thought they'll stray too far away. It might not be like 80% possession, but as long as it's exciting and like we're trying to do things the right way, is what people say, then that's the approach I would imagine they'll go for. Probably someone young and upcoming as well.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, is there any names getting banded around? Because obviously Russell Martin's out of a job. Yeah,
no, he got what's the word? Like, he didn't necessarily turn it away himself, but that was shut down quite early doors, I think. I mean, the way that he left wasn't as amicable as it could have been, and I think there's a bit of discontent between him and the club that I personally would be very shocked to see him come back after that. So,
well, I mean, this season, looking at Swansea's away form, won 1 out of 8 since the turn of the year, which came at Bristol City at the beginning of February. Won 5 out of 20 in total. Only Oxford and Plymouth have scored fewer goals on the road as well. So it doesn't seem like it's been much fun to travel watching Swansea on the road this season. Has this been the way that they've set up, or can you look back and say, actually, we've been unlucky in certain games not to pick up points?
Before Williams was sacked, no, I was probably dreading them all. And to be fair, when we were away, we were a bit shocked to get that win at Bristol. It was a bit of a false dawn. They did play well in that game. Well, I say play well. It was the first match he went 5 at the back, and we started quite ropey, but they kind of came into the game the longer it went on, and we had a really good second half. So that was a good win. But unfortunately, they couldn't continue that, and he ended up getting sacked. Since Sheehan's come in, the away games haven't been that bad. We lost 1-0 against Watford away. That was probably a harsh result on us. We probably deserved at least a point. So wasn't really that frustrated there. The performance was really good. Then, like I said, we got a point at Leeds, which no one expected. We scored 2 goals there, which I know Leeds are perhaps having they had a bit of a slip of form, which we probably were part of that. But again, the performance was good, and we had a penalty saved as well. So it wasn't like we weren't creating chances or getting opportunities there. So a little bit of a less spell to go off, but the 7 games that Sheehan has been in charge, the away form, I'm not as concerned at the moment as I was before. It definitely was something that we needed to work on under Luke Williams. And probably, I said we were having a good time around Christmas. Probably even then, there was signs of the away form was slipping a bit. I think we had a really dull game away at Hull, and we just didn't perform. So there was something he would have needed to look at regardless of what came next. But it does look like Sheehan's perhaps made us a bit more hard to beat and then competitive then, because we're not so focused on perhaps our identity and possession. And if we need to tweak things to tweak it to the opposition we're playing, he looks more than willing to do that, to be fair, in the game plan.
Yeah. I mean, going back to that draw at Leeds, I mean, was there any kind of changes or tweaks he made to either kind of the personnel or shape that he did to face Leeds that maybe Sunderland should expect to see at the Stadium of Light on Saturday?
Well, it's the first game that he went to a 5-at-the-back system. He did continue that against Derby, but I think it was more because of how well it worked rather than anything else, So Leeds was the first one, and it looked like he'd done it to suit playing Leeds for a reason. And yeah, it did work because it just allowed us to be, I think it meant they couldn't overrun us, and we were able to exploit their defensive mistakes a little bit more, which they probably made a few of in terms of letting us have the ball a bit higher up the pitch. So we're doing a bit of a press and stuff to put pressure on to make sure that we can take advantage of those opportunities. And like I said, focusing a little bit more in the midfield and the strength we've got in the midfield, and then attacking through the wing backs rather than wingers. So it's coming from perhaps a bit deeper, but we have been playing with a little bit of a high line, even though I've kind of just said it's coming from a bit deeper. And we kind of just, I think, snuffled them out a bit and tried to nullify the threats that they had. They got some good pace in there, like Dan James and stuff. Don't get me wrong, got through a few times. But having that extra defender, I think, really did work and help us manage the opportunities we were conceding a bit better. I would imagine we will continue playing a 5-at-the-back system in this game. Whether he changes anything individually with the way that they're doing little things within the match, we'll have to wait and see. I wouldn't have thought anything massive. I think it would be quite similar to what they probably put out at Leeds, because I think going away to Sunderland and having seen what you brought us last November, I want to say, was it, that we played? The first half was really good for us, and in the second half you guys kind of came out a new team and one of the best teams probably we've ever played for that 45-minute period. So it would be interesting to see if they look at that game and try and nullify the threats that we were kind of suffering from then. But maybe the 5-at-the-back system will be one way of helping to do that, because I think you kind of overrun us a little bit when you were on the counter and coming forward and being a bit too direct for what we could cope with. So having those extra bodies in the defensive shape will allow us to do it. And maybe then more of a, not going to say counter-attacking, but if we're more direct then when we are breaking, rather than maintaining the ball as a priority, I think that's where we can be a bit more dangerous than we would have normally been in the past.
Yeah. And again, just kind of as an overall for this season, obviously big change, ownership, management. Do you think it's going to be a few more years rebuilding in the Championship before we see them trying to challenge for promotion?
I mean, yeah, look, every time this happens, we say it's going to take a few years and then perhaps we'll build something that can challenge. But unfortunately, the few years is coming to an end before it kind of begins a lot of the time these days. So that's what you want in there. You want a manager who's going to come in and be here for a bit of time. But I think in an ideal scenario, the club needs to decide how they're going to play, stick to it. The recruitment needs to work aside from the manager, so that when the manager changes, the club's in already the right direction. I'm not saying they shouldn't have an influence in who comes in, but it shouldn't be all and end all of, right, we're going to buy players to suit what you're doing. It needs to be, we're buying players to suit the way this club plays. And as the manager, they need to be recruited for that too, which to an extent we tried doing it because we flip-flopped a few times recently is what's created a bit of a mess within the squad, and that takes years to correct. And we got players on high wages that don't play, Christian Pedersen being one of them who just, I don't know what he's doing. He's on the beach somewhere until his contract runs out. And it just makes it more difficult for us then in the market because there's money tied up in a waste, basically. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but he's played like 5 games for us in 3 years. So, and I believe he's one of our highest earners, for example, and he's just one example. So, all of those players that Michael was brought in for Michael Duff, again, not all bad players, but like Jerry Yates, for example, he's out on loan at Derby.
Yeah.
Like that's money, we brought him in. We still haven't recouped any of that really when it comes to selling him on. We've got another striker on loan up in Scotland that he was brought in for a couple of mil. Really didn't see anything from him. So all of these decisions, they take years to correct. And I think that has an impact then on what any new manager can do. Yeah. So until they kind of get the structure of the recruitment process, I think, more rigid, and then the managers that come in suit a certain style, give him a bit of influence, but not too much, so that if they do move on, the next guy can come in and the players he's got at his disposal are already suited to what he's trying to do as well. I think that's the model you need to be at these days to be successful over long periods of time. There's too much chopping and changing in football to kind of trust your manager, I think, fully with these things.
Yeah. Well, it's always good to get an outsider's view as well. And I've already mentioned us trying to hang on the coattails of the top 3. And you mentioned that game back in November at your place between the two sides. But what do you make of Sunderland this season?
I've been really impressed, to be honest. I know last season was a bit up and down for you, and you had a period with the manager that you'd probably rather forget.
Yep.
So to bounce back from that now, and I've always been impressed with your young talent, and that's happened for a long, bit of a long period of time now, and they're coming through thick and fast, the ones that are making an impression on the pitch. But it's good to see that they are being successful, or you have been successful with all of these young players. I know you've got a bit of more of a balance this season with a couple more experienced players within that. But I think a lot of the players who are making a good difference are younger, and it may be surprising for some teams in the league to look at that and think how much you get out of them because they haven't got as much experience as perhaps other teams. But yeah, I've been really impressed with what Sunderland have done, and some of the games that I have watched as well, they look quite threatening on the attack. There was a few games that I looked at. I think Mundell was playing in a couple of them, and I only say his name because we were linked with him in the summer and nearly got him, apparently we didn't. And then I see him playing well, taking players on, running up players, doing things, scoring goals. And he's just like, that's everything we needed right now. We just don't have. And it's seeing it on the pitch with someone else, then we could have got him. So it's frustrating. But yeah, it just shows exactly what's working at Sunderland. Doesn't mean he would have come into Swansea and done that same job. So yeah, exactly. I just really impressed with what Sunderland done. And to be fair, it'd be interesting to see how the playoffs goes, because I think everyone's expecting the current top 3 to kind of go up. Yeah. Sunderland would be the team that I think could stop that happening. It's the playoffs, anything can happen. I don't want to jinx it for anyone. But I just think the gulf, you've got maybe before last night, you had a 15-point gap to the team below you. And it's kind of like the top 3, you're a little bit adrift, which I think the results last night perhaps mean that's probably unrealistic now to overturn. But sitting in 4th with no competition, that's a really good effort, especially considering the teams that are ahead of you. Everyone's expecting that. They've got parachute payments, and the gulf these days of those relegated teams is really hard to match. We've seen that for the last couple of seasons now. But then you are a cut above the rest when it comes to the battle for the playoffs. You're not really in that battle. You're kind of just sitting there. So yeah, I think credit to the way the Sunderland have dealt with this season.
Yeah, well, you mentioned us. I'm still fully expecting Watford or Millwall or someone like that to win their last 5 and then go.
Millwall look like they're having a good go at it, don't they?
Yeah.
To be fair.
Yeah, exactly. And the Alex Neil effect. We'll look forward to that in the playoffs. But Saturday's game, you talked about the draw at Leeds giving you a little bit of confidence. But do you fancy Swansea to take away maybe at least a point?
I don't necessarily fancy us to do it. I think we lose. To be fair, I think. One goal margin, probably be fair, in line with perhaps your recent results, low scoring affairs, tight games. I think we'll be set up to be difficult to beat. Our attack does flatter to deceive it a lot of the time. We've been a little bit better since Sheehan's come in, but you mentioned it yourself when you looked at since the turn of the year how many goals we score it, and it's not an abundance. We got 2 at Leeds, but it's not often we get in that. Like we 1-0 at home to Derby in the game after, so difficult game for us. I don't think I'm not writing us off from perhaps taking someone away. You know, I feel more happy thinking that we could sneak away with a point here than I would have before. But if I'm going to predict the game, I would probably say we will lose this one. But it's not what I'm not really expecting anything different. So if we do come away with something, then, you know, it's a bonus point, if you like the one that Leeds was a bonus point for us in our little fight to make sure we got a cushion. Those ones that you don't expect are always helpful.
Yeah, well, we're in a strange place waiting for these playoffs. And we talked before we started recording that you're waiting for some plans to drop into place to maybe make the trip. But have you getting up to the Stadium of Light before?
I probably won't be making the Stadium of Light. It's quite a trek, to be fair.
Yeah.
Usually my commitments to especially away games have to go in line with my work commitments. And with such a distance, usually it means more than one day. So, I probably won't be making this one. It is something I would like to do, but one of my podcast hosts regularly goes up to Sunderland away because he's got friends that live up there, so they turn it into a bit of a weekender. So he might be there this time. I haven't actually asked him, but he likes going up there. He enjoys up there. So yeah.
Sounds good. Well, I suppose other than the result, I hope you enjoy your day on Saturday. but it just leaves me to say thank you very much for your time, Luke. It's been an absolute pleasure.
That's all right. Thanks for having me on, and maybe speak to you in the future. Well, maybe not next season. We'll see what happens in the.
Well, that's it. If it ends badly for us, we can do this all again next season.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Okay,
thanks
for having me.
And thanks again for everyone for listening. If you can't keep up with our pod releases, I don't blame you because I have a lot of them still lined up myself. But please do like and subscribe and all of that sort of stuff. And we do appreciate any feedback. So get in touch with us and look out on the Roker Report website for everything else we do. And of course, the next pod should be dropping very soon. But from us, bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.